Hey Nick, very good presentation there. Um, I don't know why you scratched me from the race before it got out of the barn. Is it because Mr. Evans Pritchard is not aware of monetary reform? Mr. Krugman? All the guys that went to economics school, when they said, what's down that monetary reform room back there, and they said, don't go back there, because nobody's going to give you a PhD for that. Nobody's going to publish your book for that, okay? So it's hard to get a horse up into this race, and doesn't prevent me from being here. We're down 3-zip. 5 minutes to play. Do we want to change the rules? Do we want to have a new huddle? The game plan ain't working. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? 3-zip. That's huge to overcome, isn't it? That's huge to overcome. So, I want to remind you, Nick, how we got together on that corner. The permanent money system. Do you remember that, Nick? The permanent money system? Do you remember what Mr. Hempel said? If its defects are not remedied soon, the civilization is at risk. 3-zip, 5 minutes to go. Civilization. Financial, economic civilization as we know it. Okay, Nick? Now, take the Austrian route, let the thing come crashing down, but you still got to build something back up. And do you start to build something back up without taking count of what went wrong? Because you actually made a comment. You said, maybe it is the money system, but because we've got nobody up there in Washington, that really knows enough to care about it to try to figure out the alternative, that's why we don't have a horse in this race, okay? But I want to remind you of something, Nick, okay? I want to remind you of the Chicago Plan for Monetary Reform. I want to remind you that we came, down this route by virtue of essentially free banking failing. Okay, I'm going to say essentially. I know that the Austrians are going to say that wasn't free banking. We had a national banking system. Banks were creating their own notes. They were creating their own money. There was no limitation. There was no monetary policy. There was no monetary system. So out of the Fed, we got a money system. And when we got the money system, it was supposed to fix what was wrong. And you mentioned, I think, the 1920, 2021 recession, contraction. What happened? That didn't work. What about the 1929 crash? That didn't work. So the economists started in 1929, the guys who said they weren't really so sure about this private money creation thing, Nick. They said, let's see if we can figure out some other way to do something, okay? What they figured on became proposed legislation in 1933. So the fact that, I don't know enough people in Washington, to get this thing moved ahead, reflects the fact that my name's not Henry Simons, reflects the fact that I'm not the head of the Chicago School of Economics, okay? That I don't have cohorts from Columbia and from Princeton and from Stanford and Berkeley, and that's what that represents. But they did, they had that, and they put that forward. So the viability of the option that I'm promoting has a sound backing, an extremely sound backing, Nick. Okay, and when you come right down to it, what they said was the same thing Robert Hempel said. In fact, it was Robert Hempel, the guy who wrote the quote when we met on the corner of a permanent money system road. He drafted the legislation for Congress on the Chicago Plan proposal. Okay? So I know we got all these modern guys, you got Krugman, Krugman doing Keynes, empty. Why? Debt money. Why? That's why. Because Krugman will not touch the fact that the stimulus is borrowed money and doesn't need to be borrowed money. That's the difference between my proposal and Krugman's. Okay? So we have the situation where there's no way out with those horses. Yes, it can come crashing down. Of course, the Austrians are always right because it can come crashing down. That is to say, it can lock itself up and credit can stop. But can you imagine that? Credit can stop. I'm back to my dad again. Joey, it's 1929. Everybody had a job. Everybody went to work. And what happened? The productivity of the nation came to a grinding halt. Everybody who wanted to go to work couldn't. Everybody who wanted to pay their mortgage couldn't. The people that wanted to go out and buy their food couldn't, because wages and jobs went to the wayside while the credit industry, the debt industry really, okay, but the credit industry came crashing down. Why? Because they overinflated and invested in speculative commodities, the same as we've done now. What do you think those toxic assets are, Nick? Those toxic assets are exactly the same thing, a time variation of exactly the same thing that they did in the 1920s. So the 1920s, those roaring 20s, is the equivalent of our, glorious aughts, in this century. Okay, so you can't dismiss the fact that I'm not able to get the people in Washington to listen up, because I'm going to tell you something, Nick. Very few leaders in Washington, very few people willing to go out on the limb in Washington. Very few people, first of all, even willing to confront the money power. Okay, which what I'm proposing to do is to confront the money power. Okay, to take the money power and put it in its place behind economic democracy, behind our national identity, behind the well-being of the people. The money system is only supposed to really provide the means of exchange for the economy. So it's not fair to scratch the fact that there's something wrong with the money system. None of these guys, that you mentioned, Marshall Auerbach or Krugman or Ed Harrison, none of those guys really have thought through the debt money system, the failure of the debt money system. They're incapable of thinking of it through. Why? Because they went to the other economic school. They went to the school of capital markets, financial markets, and they're very comfortable there, Nick, okay? But hasn't all been written, I see kind of my purpose here is kind of like a gatekeeper, to get this option through the gate, to get it into the race. And that's what we're proposing to do, to get it into the race. So don't give it short shrift, Nick. You're going to find it was very premature to give it short shrift, Nick. Okay? I commend you, for laying this out for people. That what's really going on here is really hell, holy hell. That this system is coming crashing down, and it's coming crashing down. Why? That's the question. How come we haven't had any investigation of the crash? We can't afford to because the house was on fire. Is the house still on fire? I thought we've stopped putting the gray area into the charts because we had nominal growth. Okay, I promise you I won't say it's the money system.